morning. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Morning Digest show where we discuss leadership matters. I'm your host, Reverend Shitakwa, and today we continue with a topic that we began last week on leadership pitfalls, looking at the life of Moses or the leadership of Moses and learning from him some of the pitfalls that are subtle that we need to be able to avoid. So welcome once again, and I want to encourage you, invite your friends and your family to join in the conversation and be part of this conversation. It's a conversation, and we will be happy to have you join us in the conversation through your comments, through your feedback, and any questions that you may have, and we'll be happy to respond to them during this particular show. So thank you so much for tuning in. And today again, I have my good friend who we were with yesterday and last week, whom we began the conversation last week with, and that is none other than Reverend Richard Chogo from Deliverance Church Umoja. Karibu sana.
Asante mchungaji.
Yeah, we had a good conversation last week.
Yes.
I'm saying last week so that I don't say yesterday again. It sounds like yesterday. Yeah, we had a good conversation last week on the pitfalls of leadership. I trust you've been well since then.
Yeah, by God's grace, the life of a pastor.
Yes.
Ups and downs. You can't predict.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
By God's grace, we are alive.
Amen.
Yes.
All right. So we want to pick up the conversation where we were.
Okay.
And just a little recap. It was interesting to look at the life of Moses and see you brought out something very, it sounds simple, yet, when you think about it, it becomes quite weighty about assumptions.
Yep.
As a pitfall.
Yes.
Yeah, so a little recap for the sake of that person who didn't watch. And we encourage you to go back and watch, because we'll not probably talk much of what we said last time. We'll just strengthen, pick it up from there and strengthen it. But it would be nice, if you're going to enjoy this show, it would be nice to also watch, what we spoke the last time. So yeah, Moses was this great leader.
Yeah, Moses was, first of all, we acknowledge Moses in the history of the Jews.
Yes.
Is probably the most iconic figure, because up to now they still don't fancy Jesus as we think.
That's true.
But then when you go back, you realize Moses was probably the most, set up to succeed in his time. I mean, he had the preparation, he had all those things going for him. But then in his early attempts to take on God's purposes, God's purpose for him to be a leader, he failed miserably and ended up in the cold, quote unquote. Yet it was preparation in the cold for 40 years and all that. And so my interest was, what is this that made him fail miserably to end up, going back to school for 40 other years.
After being in some of the prestigious schools.
Yes. And we said from Acts chapter 7,
yes,
which Stephen gives us a summary of Moses' life.
Yes.
And he mentions something, and this is in a version called New Living Translation. You will not see it in other versions. So it's good whenever you're reading the Bible to read it different versions, because it kind of gives you aspects that you may not see.
Yes.
And so when I read it in the New Living Translation, I saw a word that sent me thinking. And I reflected on my own history as a leader.
Yes.
And I was like, oh no, this is the same mistake I made here and there, and it got me into one or two troubles.
Yes.
And so the verse is verse 25. When you read it in the New Living Translation,
yes,
it says, Moses assumed his fellow Israelites would realize that God had sent him to rescue them, but they didn't. Moses assumed. And on the strength of that assumption, Moses did certain things that got him into trouble. He killed an Egyptian. He did a few other things because he was assuming. And we said last time he assumed it was his time.
Yes.
My time has come. Then he made assumptions on timing. Then he made assumptions on God's preparation. That he was like, I'm ready for this thing. I'm ready for this thing. And then we said he made assumptions when it comes to the people. That people will receive him and clap. They would recognize him. The ground would accept him. But that was not so. So
timing,
preparation,
and then the people.
And people. And you know, those are critical areas that you need to be careful of if you are going to go far as a leader. Timing is critical. Preparation is everything. You know, preparation is king.
And you know, it was interesting to actually think about that because you would imagine, like we said earlier, and now when you bring it out, that Moses was actually prepared 40 years of growing up in the royal palace. You would assume the guy is prepared.
Yeah, 40 years. The mother had done a splendid job in helping Moses develop the values. Because if you read the book of Hebrews, he had the right set of values. There are some things he could not do. In fact, at some point he says he chose to suffer with the children of Israel rather than to enjoy the pleasures of the king in Egypt.
So he knew his identity.
I mean, this man, you know, the young people in Eastlands would say, I'm a Eva. I mean, he was just ripe for this thing. But then, boom, 40 years in the cold. No poster about you. Nobody wants to touch you.
And I think that should speak about God's preparation, how it looks like vis-a-vis what we think preparation looks like.
Yeah. I mean, we should not make assumptions we already know. I don't know if you've ever sat with some people who feel they are ready. They have arrived. And they put pressure on you. Like you must give me a chance to preach.
I have had such.
Yeah, I mean, you never make assumptions that you have arrived, that you have what it takes. There has to be a certain measure of humility. God resists the proud, and he gives grace to the humble. There has to be a certain measure of humility that there could be something I need to learn. And that's why that posture, I really respect anyone who maintains the posture of I want to learn. I mean, yes, I've got all these degrees, but I want to learn.
And then I suspect that God waits until every trace of, you know, pride or self-centeredness for him to say, now you are ready.
Yes. Because that assumption of I'm ready, I have what it takes, comes with a certain cockiness, certain, you know, self-confidence
and some level of arrogance.
That can be very costly.
Yes.
And that can lead to great pitfalls as a leader. And so there has to be that place, like we said last Tuesday, there has to be that place of constantly saying, search me, oh God, and know my heart. See if there is anything inside of me. Because we said last time that there is something that Moses never fully dealt with.
Yes.
And it should have been dealt with in preparation. It is called anger.
And I think we should pick it up now from there and address that further. Because anger seems to be, we all have some kind of, we all get worked up sometime. We all get, we all get to get angry.
Yes.
And for Moses, like we said, 80 years later, he still had this story.
80 years later.
From 40 when he killed someone to when he struck the rock twice.
Exactly. And I'm so sure it was part of him when he was growing up in 20s, 30s. Then it manifests at a critical moment in the 40s. And you could easily call it as righteous anger. But then it costs him then. Then 80 years later, 80 years later, it costs him, and he's not able to step into the promised land,
Yes.
Because he was angry, and he smote the rock. And that rock, the Bible says, it was Christ who was following them. And so this time he was even now striking, God.
So he thought he's just striking a rock. What he didn't realize, it was a serious story.
Yeah. I think it's the book of 1 Corinthians or 2nd. That says this was the rock was Christ.
Yes.
That was following them, and they could drink water from that rock. And so this time he strikes the rock, and God is like, "Come on now, at this rate."
And I'm intrigued by that story. Why? Because at one point he kills someone. The punishment is not as heavy. Okay, I don't know whether it's, let's say, okay, he went to the cold for 40 years.
Yeah, it's not as severe. He was given a chance.
He was given a chance.
Yes.
But you strike the rock.
He's not given a chance.
I mean, it looks like in terms of weight,
it's lesser sin.
From our human eye,
yes,
it was a lesser sin.
Yes.
Yet, he couldn't cross into the promised land.
Reval, but you need to understand that, and that's what my Bishop J.B. Masinde always tells us,
yes,
that the higher you go in terms of authority,
yes,
in leadership, I mean, the greater the expectation, the higher the threshold of what we expect of you. And so at some level, there are some things,
get away with stuff.
Yes, there are some things you can get away with in as much as they are crazy.
Yes.
And we can give you another chance. But at some level, something that is less than this, we will not give you a second chance because of your level of responsibility and authority. And so as you grow in leadership, then there are some things you cannot afford. There's some things you cannot take for granted. All right? That's why, Billy Graham at this level of leadership could not sit with a lady who's not his wife in a car, just the two of them. Could not afford that. But he could afford that maybe when he was a budding evangelist. He could sit with 10 ladies in the car all by himself, and nobody could raise an issue. But because he's a public figure, he stands for certain things, he couldn't afford to make certain mistakes. He would always cancel with ladies the door open. At this level of leadership, a slight thing. I mean, look at some of the characters that have fallen. Some of the wonderful men of God that have fallen in the past couple of years. Just one of them, wandered into a sister's room to just discuss matters of the heart. Some gentleman in Australia, and that knocked him out. I mean, he had the biggest charismatic church in the West, which was probably opening churches in all sorts of places. That knocked him off. I mean, another one just, had a casual encounter with one of the leaders, one of the teaching pastors in his church, who was the wife of another pastor in the church. And that encounter costed him, I mean, his leadership. And those are things that somebody who is doing internship will do with getting away with it. But as you grow in leadership,
and what makes these guys, because I'm imagining these are people who've been in ministry for long. They have grown something big, like now the mega churches that we are talking about, they have grown. And what will make such a person walk into a trap? The assumptions. You see, assumption, the state of making assumptions is one would call a state of not being vigilant. You see, the scripture tells us, those of you who stand, those who think you stand, watch lest you fall. So that place of watch is a critical place. It means that I have to be extra careful. I have to be extra careful. Just a little comment on a text message to a sister in the church at a particular level of leadership will be taken differently than this if this sister was a fellow youth member and I'm the youth chairman. Now I am the bishop. Just the same sister sending a message, even using the word dear, may mean a lot. And so you have to be extra
extra vigilant, increase at that level. You need high accountability.
Yes.
The higher you go, the more accountable you need to become to people around you. You need to increase levels of accountability, structures of accountability around you. You have to have more people that can speak to you.
Yes.
But I am afraid when I look at many of our pastors around, the higher you go, the less accountable, the fewer people who can point things at you, because now you are the father of the ministry, you are the apostle of the ministry, you are the shepherd of the church.
So you have no one who can actually speak into your life.
Nobody can speak into your life. They have to use a very long route. They have to go and look for, I don't know, a peer who has to look for, I don't know who, a counsel to come and look for you. You need to invite as much, accountability, input, feedback as possible in your life. I mean, you really have to have those people who tell you are the man.
Yes.
Like David. I mean, because he wasn't aware. Nobody had told him. And he had done grave things.
Yes.
Leave alone Moses. He had killed somebody's husband.
Yeah.
And actually that was basically rape, because I don't think the lady had a choice.
She had no choice.
I mean, the king has summoned you, and he has his needs. So I don't think she willingly did this. That was rape, statutory rape. And this man, nobody could come back and tell him, except Nathan, who came and had to be very tactful. But we need to invite as much accountability. The higher we go, the more accountable we need to become.
So now, I'm looking at that thing of assumptions, how for leaders is one of the greatest pitfall that we are looking at. And now for Moses, now when it comes to his anger issue, could it be he never thought this thing can sabotage him? Because look at the places where he gets angry. The first time I see him angry, he's trying to deliver the assumption that he's ready.
Yes.
The second one, he throws the 10 commandments,
which God had written.
And he could justify it because he was angry not at God but at the people who have made a golden calf.
Yes.
So that seems justifiable, but it's still anger.
Yes.
The third one now is striking the rock twice when he was supposed to do it once, and he was
to speak.
He was to speak, sorry.
Yes.
And then he strikes it, and then he did it because he was angry again at the people.
Now, let me tell you something about that striking of the rock. Isn't it earlier that he was instructed to strike the rock for water to come out?
Yes.
Earlier?
Yes.
But now God says, speak to the rock. Okay? Because sometimes you also make assumptions, especially if we are experienced leaders.
Yes.
We make assumptions about God's instructions. So probably the anger clouded his mind.
Yes.
And he was not keen on the instruction. He was keen on, God says, rock, water, then he
remembered I struck the rock
last time, so I'll strike again. But the instructions have been changed. The instructions have been changed.
So that's the assumption that I know what is supposed to be done.
Yeah, and it's an assumption that we who have been in ministry for long.
Yes.
Okay? People like you and me, or me and you.
Yes.
When I say you and me, it seems like you're more guilty than me, but let me be more guilty.
No,
me and
we
you.
are all at that place.
When we've been in ministry for long, we assume that I'll just do this and do this and do this. And so sometimes you're not very keen on the God's instruction.
Man, that's something, that's sobering. The assumption that I know how to go about it. I know what to do.
And I've done it before and it has worked.
Yes.
I've done it before and it's a constant, and that's where sometimes there's a strong battle between a new generation of leadership and an older generation of leadership.
Yes.
Sometimes we who could be in the category of older generation of leadership, we may stifle and quench some voices within the new generation because we don't understand what they're trying to say because we assume we knew, we assume we already, have
this is how it has worked.
And it has worked. Yeah. Look at this ministry. This is what has brought this ministry to where it is. And then you're coming to tell me that we need to try something new. What is this new? Probably God has spoken to them and he has not spoken to you like he spoke to Samuel and had not spoken to Eli or Eli. And we make assumptions. But it's important sometimes to say, especially if 2, 3, 4, 5 people whom I'm raising are saying, Bishop, we need to reconsider how we do this ministry. You need to pause and say, let me also go and seek the Lord. And try and listen from God. Could this be you speaking to a certain generation and you're not speaking to me?
It reminds me about Joshua and Moses himself again. Moses faltered on the basis of, like we are saying now, on assumption. Joshua, on the other hand, could have faltered there. I'm assuming he was in that position because you are a protege of this iconic leader. Then he's gone. You would imagine what he did and worked. That's the way to go. But then God comes and gives another instruction. Takes him in a different trajectory. Take a sword instead of a rod. So if Joshua assumed, he could have sabotaged his ministry.
Exactly. I mean, if he assumed that he must do things the way Moses did them. And God is very clear to Joshua. He says, Moses, my servant, is dead.
Haku means what?
Arise. And now take the children of Israel across. It says you need to understand that I'm through with this era. And so it may mean things may be done differently. And so I like what you say. This is not the era of the rod. This is the era of the sword. Okay? In as much as we are saying that probably God had budgeted for Moses to cross over. Because he still had the strength. And God could have figured out how to make the rod and the sword work. Because when they were fighting the Amalekites, the rod and the sword worked
together.
They worked together. And so probably that could have been the formula. But now God says the rod has made assumptions and I'm through with the rod. Now the sword will be, so it gives a different set of instructions. It's important to also not assume on God's instructions.
And although God said, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. So that's the constant. But the assumption that the strategy is the same was the wrong thing that could have sabotaged someone like Joshua.
Exactly. Assumptions are dangerous. And I think that's why I always insist that what Jesus tells the churches in Revelation 2 and 3, he tells all the churches, he gives different set of instructions to different churches. The church in Laodicea, the church in Ephesus, of all the instructions he gives, there's only one that he repeats when it comes to all the churches. But there are some that he gives to 2, others he gives to 3, others he gives to 1. But then there's one that he gives to all of them. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. We should be more keen to listen than to make assumptions. And so I think it's emphasis that listening is key. Don't make assumptions, especially when it comes to instructions. Listening is key. Listening is key.
Amazing. You can participate in the conversation. Join us, send us your feedback, send us your questions, and we'll be happy to look at them as we continue with the show. Now, I'm thinking about maybe we can wrap that part up as we go into what the other assumptions that we can try and dig in a bit. But the issue of for Moses, he, I don't know how to bring that issue of anger out, that he never thought that it could be the very thing that could sabotage his leadership. What are some, it may be a broad question, but in relation to us now, when we look at our leadership, what are some of those things that we tend to assume that can actually sabotage us. Like,
yeah. Rev, there's an interesting sermon we listened to this past Sunday in our church, delivered by the master guru, Reverend Oscar. He's been on this show.
The leadership guru.
The leadership guru. That man he doesn't have many words like mine here, but the few words he gives.
We normally say he's intense.
He's intense, eh? So for my 1,000 words, he'll just give you 5 words. It will outweigh my 1,000 words. I love that man. Anyway, he said that we need to be, as Christians, we need to be conscious of several intelligences that we must embrace. So he talked about, the IQ, which all of us are more familiar with in the leadership space. And it's more just the mental ability to process things. And then he talked about emotional intelligence, which is EQ. Emotional quotient. The IQ's intelligence quotient. Then he talked about another one which we will not talk about here, adaptability quotient, AQ. All right, but I'm interested in the EQ. My brother, that is one area that we who especially are leaders within the let me be more, I don't know, maybe I'll be a bit biased because I'm a Pentecostal preacher and I'm a leader within the charismatic space. We are insisting so much on spiritual, let me say spiritual quotient, where the spiritual gifts and all this, the anointing, the power of God, that they are the currency to leadership. But there's one aspect called emotional quotient that is a very critical currency to great leadership. If you don't manage that, and that's where a lot of pitfalls come up in the area of our emotional intelligence. When we don't invest in growing in our emotional quotient, when we don't invest in growing in some of those things that have to do, how do you respond to people? How do you manage people? How do you handle people? How do you handle, what's your chemistry like? That's where, because leadership we cannot talk about leadership without talking about people. And
leadership is about people.
And if you are going to go far, many people have fallen because they have not invested in their emotional quotient. That's my take.
Emotional quotient is one of those areas we must be watch out for, because a lot of assumptions in that area can cost your leadership. I think that's a good place to pause and reflect as we take a short break and then come back to pick it up and continue, going into this conversation further. And I want you, as you take this break, write to us some of the things that you're picking up from this conversation, and probably some of the things you would want us to tackle in the aspect of leadership pitfalls that we are discussing today. So see you in a moment. 2 minutes.
Pastor Nehem and Liz Gishuki of Life Church International Mweki, together with Fam Mission Team, invites you to the Great Harvest Crusade on Thursday 2nd to Sunday 5th of November 2023 at Maji Mazuri Grounds from 4 p.m. daily. Guest ministers include Minister Ken Kamau, Minister Sharon Moirore, and Evangelist Eva. John Mutugi and Alice Warano shall be ministering in music. The crusade theme is drawn from Matthew chapter 9 verse 35. Jesus saves, heals, and delivers. The Great Harvest Crusade. Come and receive your miracle. in Pillars of Faith.
These truths that we bring out every week around the Word of God, they are meant to strengthen our faith.
Time is a consequence of light. The light you have will inform the time you'll be in.
We seek to fulfill the mandate of the Great Commission.
The purpose of God for believers is for formation of sons.
What are the pillars that we need in our lives?
Bearing fruit is spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
You cannot bear fruit if you're not mature.
That is our agenda, motivation and intention.
Introduce Jesus into the matter,
Yeah.
and your times and seasons will shift.
Pillars of Faith, every Tuesday, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Welcome back. We are here on the Morning Digest show discussing leadership matters, and our topic today has been leadership pitfalls, which is a continuation from what we began last week. And just come from the first half of the show looking at how assumptions can cost you, and the assumptions that Moses made that affected his leadership, assuming that about timing, assumptions concerning timing, assumptions concerning your preparedness, and then the third assumption was concerning people. And so we, at the break, as we went on the break, we were discussing about emotional quotient as an area that can, we can assume a lot there, and it can affect our leadership. And so on this, as we take off from here, we want to look at that third assumption on people, because we've tackled the other two a little more even in the previous show. And so we want to talk about the assumption when it comes to people, tying it in with the emotional quotient issue. So what are the areas of assumption as a leader that we tend to have about people?
Yeah, there are various, and I don't know if in a space like this we can even cover all of them. But allow me to, just to set us up, because we'll refer to this as we move along.
Yes.
Allow me to read a portion of scripture that we are familiar with.
Yes.
It's in the book of Luke, and it is in Luke chapter 6.
Yes.
From verse 31. It says to 39, it says, do to others as you would like them to do to you. If you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good only to those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. And if you lend money only to those who can repay you, why should you get credit? Even sinners lend to other sinners for a full return.
Yes.
Love your enemies. Do good to them. That is not emotional maturity. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid.
Yes.
That is even to your enemies. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will always come back against you.
Yes.
Forgive others, and you'll be forgiven. And then what we like sharing when you're collecting offerings, give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in a full measure, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over, poured out in your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. Then Jesus gave the following. Then it talks about the blind person. Somebody was a speck in the eye, and somebody was a log.
Yes.
The person with the speck is more interested in the eye, in the log. We can't get into that for today. But a couple of things come up here, assumptions that you can make. Moses made all different assumptions, but there are other sets of assumptions we can make when it comes to people.
Yes.
Number one, I think, which is very interesting, is that we can assume that people will treat us in a way that we have not, treated them. We can assume that people are they owe us. They owe us. Who was the other?
They owe us.
They owe us or something like that.
We can assume that they owe us certain honor, certain privileges.
Yeah. And that's the assumption Moses made, that people you'll celebrate him and all this. But we need to understand that before people feel people feel that they that word of owing is really confusing me. That they are indebted to you. There has to be an investment of a certain measure.
You can only draw out what you have poured in.
And leaders make that mistake. And they assume that sometimes they have poured out enough. Yet they have poured out, according to their own imagination. They have poured out what they thought those people need. And maybe that's not what they need. Okay? And so they are expecting it to come back a good measure. But they have not even given as they should. Do to others what you have them do to you. Don't assume that people will treat you in a particular way when you have not made an investment that would bring that back. There's a time I went complaining to my bishop about the church he had assigned me to lead, about how people are behaving in that church. And I had just done 2 years in that church. He said, Richard, drink a cup of tea here. Listen, first of all, feed the cow before you can even begin to milk the cow. You're expecting these things from these people, and yet you've just done 2 years with them. Do you know how long? At that time, he had done quite a number of years in Deliverance Church. Do you know how long I've been here and how much I've been here? And these people, do you see them doing these things? I've spent time in their house. I've gone for funerals. I've dedicated their children. I've been with them in hospital. That's why you see so-and-so committed. Then I was like, okay, let me go and work. I still have some way to go. So there has to be some measure, because we have a new brand of leaders within, especially the charismatic spec, that are expecting so much loyalty from their, and it's loyalty demanded. It's not loyalty earned. And it is loyalty one way. One way. Loyalty up. Yes. But we ourselves don't give the same. We don't give the same. And we are expecting it from them. In fact, there should be a certain amount of care. And sometimes we assume that we have cared for people around us. Yet, we have not really cared for them. And I'm a pastor, so one of those areas of assumption that I think we tend to imagine, we have is that what we do on the pulpit is enough. Yeah. And that's so true. I was having lunch with some wonderful pastors in Kampala, some good friends of mine. Pastor Linus and Georgette, they are pastors of a church called Vive Church. Yes. In one of the campuses. Yes. And we're having a very interesting conversation with them. We had preached and all that. And so they were telling me how their afternoon is looking like. They have to be so-and-so, with so-and-so, they have to visit so-and-so, they have to do this. And then they ask them, how about your week? I say, we have to do this, you have to do this. Then, Pastor Georgette, breathed in and breathed out and said, we've come to discover that true pastoral work is not on the pulpit. True true pastoral work is out in the homes, in the hospitals, in all that workplaces. When you're reaching out to these people,
Yes.
it says if that is not done very well, then pulpit could just be razzmatazz, but it will not go far.
Yes.
And so you may find somebody gathers a crowd, but that crowd does not go far.
Yeah.
And it is that has led to the quality of Christianity being so compromised in some parts of the churches, some
Yes.
churches, because the investment of care and discipleship, and that investment of discipleship is not just a pulpit thing. There's more. 80% of it is in the trenches. Is in the trenches with the people. And if you assume that after I've preached powerfully, people have fallen and they have cried, then that's it. You're making a big mistake. You must be among the people.
Yes.
You must know the condition. Know well the condition of your sheep. That was God's indictment
Yes.
against the leaders of Israel just before when people went to captivity.
Yes.
They did not care. They just fleeced the people, but did not care about their condition. He says, know well the condition of your flock. Don't assume people are okay. That's another assumption we make, Revalbert, that the people around me are okay because they are smiling, they are, they have come to church, they are putting on a suit, they have, driven to church, and that they are okay. Especially, let's leave the congregation alone.
Yes.
Especially those we lead together with. Never make assumptions that people are okay. Find out. Constantly find out. Constantly make the phone calls.
Yes.
Constantly insist on scheduling visits. Constantly insist on being with them. Spare time for those leaders that you lead with and look into their eye and ask them, are you really okay? Is your wife okay? Are your children okay? And please, when you ask, are you really okay? Don't ask it as a cosmetic question.
As a,
because
like
many of us do that.
It's like, how are you? We expect the obvious answer, fine. So this one should go deeper. It's not just how are you and I expect fine. It's like, I'm really interested in how you really are. Yeah, that's the kind of asking.
Yeah. So never assume that people are okay.
Yes.
And you have a chance of meeting them probably every other Sunday.
Yes.
Never assume. And so it means you have to know details about them. You have to, go beyond that and take time. And so sometimes you have to schedule these things.
Yes.
For some people like us who are very random, you have to really be disciplined at scheduling to find out how people are doing.
Yes.
And so then now you respond to those things. And when you make a good job, like Luke 6 tells us, when you do a good job of responding to them, of giving, of investing in them, it shall come back. It shall come back.
I like that scripture that you've brought out, because these actually passages about relationships.
It's about relationship.
Giving.
It's not about giving.
Money, to be precise.
Offerings. Yeah.
It's about relationship.
It's about giving, but giving in relationship.
Yes. And so it speaks about us being proactive, so that you do to others, you invest in others, what you would like to see invested back into your life. But again, when you balance it with scripture, it's not necessarily the very people you're investing in you expect they will give back to you.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of being a farmer, of being a sower.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Being a sower.
Yes.
Is that, that's why the Bible is very clear. It will not just come the same measure.
No.
Because it will come probably from it says, shall men.
So not the very same people.
Bosom.
It could be... It will come from anywhere else.
Yeah, I like what Reverend Oscar is my boss also. So sometimes I come late, and God forgive me. I come late for a meeting he has called. So he looks at me and he says, Richard, I hope you will not harvest. And then he says, when you're harvesting, it's a bigger measure. So you'll call for a meeting and people will come the next day. So yeah.
So I like the example you just used. Even stuff like that.
Yeah.
Calling for a meeting, you come late, you're investing.
Yeah. Yeah, as a leader, you're investing. Don't assume that when you become the leader and you call for a meeting, people will come just because you're their leader. No. And I like that hierarchy of those. You're the one who's a guru at this Maxwell things of leadership.
Trying to.
I know you've done that several times in your church.
Yes.
And there is position, those levels.
Yeah, position, permission.
Permission, whatever, those things.
Personhood is the highest.
Personhood is the highest.
Yes.
But if you really, and this is a theory I'm throwing there.
Yeah.
If you really interrogate that journey, you'll find for you to get to a certain level, there's been a lot of investment you've made in people around you for you to get to a certain level. Even for you to move from position to permission, it takes, you have to invest in people. Now, when people come around you, okay, and you need to understand, I think all of us need to understand that people, when they come around you, or whether you are coming under people, in either cases, that those people that are coming around you or those you are coming under, they don't really care about you. Okay? Never assume they care about you. And Jesus did that. Jesus knew what was in their hearts. They're looking for bread.
Yeah.
They're looking for bread. And
it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
So I have all this crowd.
Yeah.
But it's not about me.
It's not about
It's about the bread I can
It's about
give.
the bread, yeah. Never assume people care about you when they come around you. They have interests.
And maybe that's the reason why we have many ministers hurt.
Yeah.
Because they
Unnecessarily
hurt.
Yes.
Because they thought all these guys, so when it comes to their issue, personal issue,
yes,
they will show up.
Yes.
But then they don't show up.
Yes. What I've devised as a theory, and I'm still processing it, is when people come around me, I have no illusions. I know they have interests.
Yes.
And so I'll do my best to figure out what is their interest. Okay? Then if it's within my ability to minister to their interest, I will minister to their interest. So I will, attend to their interests.
And that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that statement.
Okay? Then I have no illusions, because I know for some of them, if I have done a good job at helping them with their interests, then
they can transition.
They may consider my interests. Okay? And I live conscious of that.
Yes.
Also, those I work under, I recognize they have interests. And I love them, I recognize they are good people, but I know that they have interests. And caring for me is subject to their interests. I know that for a fact. So whenever I go to a space that I have to work under somebody, I must first and foremost figure out what are their interests. Okay? I will not make any assumptions about their care until I have figured out their interests. Then, as one who is working under them, I will do whatever is in my power to take care of their interests. Then I can expect care from them at some point. You have to put on that mechanism so that you can be safe in this world. But when you go assuming that people will just look at you and love you and care for you, I mean, that's immaturity. You just have to understand. People,
And leaders make those assumptions. Just because I'm your leader, I would assume then that you should be able to do A, B, C for me.
Yes.
Simply because I'm your leader.
Yes.
That assumption is wrong.
Yeah.
And yet, like Jesus, he still gave them bread.
Yes. Yeah. They had interests.
So he did not say, now because you guys are here because of bread, I'll not give you bread.
Yes.
Go away, I don't need you.
No, first of all, listen to me before I give you bread.
So you listen to me, then I give you bread.
You gave them bread once they were full until they are taken away.
Yeah.
Now when they were coming back for more, he says, okay, now I also have interest. He took care of their interests first.
Yes.
I think it's important for us to consider that when we fail to do that, we get hurt by those who are coming under us as leaders, and we begin to think they are not good, and we begin to make judgment about them, and we are disappointed with them. but then we just don't understand the dynamics of, and that is the world of, relating with people.
And sorry to interject, this thought has just come into my mind, and I'm thinking, how about the assumption that we tend to have as leaders, that people know what our interests are, or people know what our vision is, or people know where we are going, what we expect.
Yeah, that's another terrible assumption. That's why they say, first and foremost, when it comes to things like vision, mission, strategy, you can never over communicate. Because as one of my former bosses, not bosses, one of my former senior pastors called Reverend Wanjao, is the senior pastor of Mavuno. He used to say, vision leaks.
Vision leaks.
Yes. So he was very strong on constantly envisioning. And so whenever we would have any form of meeting, we would always start at the place of vision, mission, strategy. And he would randomly, pick somebody in the crowd, the leadership meetings, the pastors and the key leaders, randomly says, come and just write for us the strategy. Come and just draw for us the strategy. And we need to over-communicate. I've been to places where a whole year can go without the senior leaders mentioning the vision. And mentioning the vision and the strategy. You don't do that. Don't assume people will, because remember, they are coming with their interests.
Yes.
Vision, mission is your interest.
Yes.
And so don't assume that they will embrace your mission and vision and to celebrate. No, then they are coming with their interests. And when their interests are taken care of, that's when they will ask themselves, by the way, is there a vision in this church or a mission so that I can give some amount of money towards it?
And I think we are guilty of not communicating a lot about our vision. You're constantly envisioning.
Yes.
Because I don't find myself doing that a lot.
Yeah.
And the assumption is that maybe, the fact that you have said it before, it's in the minds of people, or the fact that you've documented it somewhere, people have read it. Those kind of assumptions.
Yeah, the church, also, I'm not here to incriminate it, but we rarely, mention this thing of vision and mission.
Yes.
And it's one of the things that we are thinking we must, reorganize and redo. And we are in the process of doing our strategic plan.
Yes.
And we are thinking one of the things we must really amplify is our vision and our mission and our strategy, which people come, and somebody has reached a certain level of leadership, and you ask them, what is the vision of this church? They're like, by the way, to preach the gospel to the whole world. And you're like, no, that is yes, it's part of that, but there's a certain biases we have when it comes to preach that gospel that are connected to our context. Are you aware of that? And so, it can be a challenge. And you don't assume. And sometimes we become angry with people. Sometimes we are angry with people because of some things they have done as we raise them as leaders, and we get into fights with people in our leadership team because of some things they're doing, yet we have not clarified our expectations, and we have not over-clarified our expectations.
Wow. Wonderful discussion here we are having. Lewis is saying it's important not to assume God's instruction. Thank you so much, Lewis. Mumo Shah is saying, joining the show, always a pleasure to see Pastor Richard and, of course, Rev Albert. And then, thank you so much, Mumo. Lewis is saying, know well the condition of your flock. Mumo again, wonderful. Never make assumptions that everyone is okay. Never assume people care about you when they come around you. Maybe it's the bread they are getting from you, or they are after. Carol is saying, Elevate TV, very insightful. Thank you so much for your feedback. Keep them coming. And as we continue, coming to bring this to a close, how do we make assumptions that people are committed?
It's very much connected to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We make assumption people are committed without having interrogated why they are committed, and you can interrogate that by having a certain measure of relationship with them. In that relationship, you can be able to tell what are their interests. What are their interests? Because some people are committed to the aspect of your mission, vision that speaks a lot to their interest, and it's okay.
Yes,
it's okay.
It's okay.
And if you can design your church in such a way that people can, somebody will be committed in the Sunday school, because their child is at that age of Sunday school, and they must make sure that is okay.
Yes,
you must allow people to do that and celebrate them and enjoy that. But then they get to a place where there's so much investment you've made in them. Their commitment is not just about their interest. They have now been able to catch the bigger picture. That's why leadership development is very critical. So that you don't assume their commitment. Then one day when they wake up and leave, I know one of the cries many pastors have had is that so just the other day woke up and joined the church of the prophetess, or the other. They just woke up and left because, hey, did you really understand their interests? Did you really understand what they were wrestling with? How much had you gone out of your way to try and respond to what they were wrestling with? So that, because they don't just wake up and leave, yet they were your key leaders. Okay? And even if they're your key leaders and they are committed, never assume they are there forever. You are the one, Reverend Albert, who taught me a very interesting principle a long time ago, that people are within your space, some for a reason and some for a season. Okay? And a season could be over. And genuinely that season is over for them. But because you lack discernment as a leader, you may get up into a fight and carry bitterness, the root of bitterness, which will defile many. Okay? Now you begin to treat everybody else with suspicion because your assistant pastor left. And maybe it was a seasonal thing. They were not there. Maybe you assumed this person is with me forever. And they are there for a season. So you must figure out. And sometimes it's a very gray area to figure out, is it for a reason or for a season? So you must be open. Part of being emotionally mature as a leader is to be open to the fact that people will come and people will go. And you don't create a fuss out of it. You don't go on Facebook and begin to rant, people are not true sons, or they don't understand this sonship thing. You don't rant. You go, you gather yourself, you say, wow, it was beautiful the time you bless them. The enemies. Remember how Jesus says about enemies? Bless enemies. Them. Bless them. In fact, find out how they are doing wherever they are. If possible, if you can throw in a visit or two to find out if they are settled where they are, in the church of the prophetess, just follow up. And if they get into a situation, show up in that situation. So, but don't assume commitment. Invest in helping people to grow to certain levels of commitment, instead of just assuming that they are committed or they will be committed.
Wow. So never assume people will simply be committed because you ask them to. People will be committed to what you're doing. I think invest and in the different levels of commitment and allow them to grow into the different levels. I think we want to bring this to a close because of time. But then I would want Rev Chogo to, give us like a parting shot. One of the things I keep saying, or at least over the years in the ministry I've come to learn, is never assume the intelligence of people. people are more intelligent than you think. They can figure things out. They can tell what you're doing. They can tell what you mean. You know, they can see through, stuff.
Yeah.
So never assume the intelligence of people. So in your parting shot, what would be like 2 or 3 never assumes? We've said many things.
Do I still laugh? But I think that is a very critical one that I would indeed borrow.
Yeah.
For the sake of a parting shot, really never assume the intelligence of your people, the people you are leading, and never assume their ability to understand the things that you're doing, and so you really need to consider them and treat them with a certain level of regard and respect and honor.
Yes.
And so the word honor is a critical word. And I think I want to close by saying that many times in the space, in the context we are in, and especially this charismatic church, honor is one way, is almost talked about one way. But have you ever considered honor from me as a leader? How do I honor the people that lead, the people that follow me? And when you honor them is when you will not assume their intelligence, and you will not assume their commitment, you will not assume they are okay, you will not assume these things. When you honor them, and honor means you regard them as special.
I love that.
I think that is very important. So give honor, and it shall come back to you. Go and figure out how honor looks like with leading people. If you're an honorable person, you'll grow in your leadership.
Wow. That's a wonderful place or parting shot, even as we bring this to a close, that the antidote to assuming a lot about people is honor. When you give honor, it will make all the difference. You will not assume a lot of the stuff that we have interacted with here. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a great conversation. I pray that this conversation doesn't stop with us, but it can be a conversation that you pick it up in your spaces, and you will begin to just ask yourself, how does honor look like in terms of where in your space, in the relationship you're in, and then also what are some of the assumptions you have made as a leader or as a person that have costed you, and what can you learn from that? Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. See you next week, same time, same place.